Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for coming to March's Inland SoCal Housing Collective meeting. Um, we're really grateful for the presenters that are coming here today. This week's meeting, or this month's meeting, is kind of an outlier. I had a few people reach out, so I just wanted to clarify. Because many of us were at the Housing California conference last week, and it was the normal scheduled collective meeting, this was just pushed back to the fourth week of March. And we have 5 weeks in March, so it's really trying to throw us all for a loop. But I just wanted to clarify that this one's a little bit of an outlier this month. But we're super excited to have our presenters here today. To kick us off, we have two ladies, two of our members and just partners in our community from Kaiser Permanente. We have Martha Valencia, who will be here as well. Cecilia Arias is here also. And I'm going to go ahead and I'll share their presentation, but they're going to share a little bit about their community health needs and assessment that they released just last month, I believe it was, and share a little bit about for both regions. And so, Martha, if you want to get started, give me just like 30 seconds to get it up, but I just welcome you to start.
Okay, do you see Cecilia on?
I don't. No, I don't. I don't yet see her on. Do you want me to just get started and then we could go to your section of the
This is
presentation?
Cecilia. Can you guys hear me
Oh,
now?
there she is. There's her number. I see her.
Yeah.
Okay.
I yeah, I'm so sorry.
That's
I'm
okay.
on my phone and I didn't get internet, so I'm just going to use the phone. So sorry, Martha. It's the last minute.
No
But
worries.
go ahead. Yes, go ahead and get started, Martha.
Okay. So Melanie, if you can please share the slides, that'll be great.
Mhm. Give me one. Sorry. There we go.
So Martha, you tell me when you want me to cover a slide.
Okay. Um, Melanie, I don't know if you can make them a little bit larger or if everyone can see. Um, well, good afternoon, everyone. So Cecilia and I are here with Kaiser Permanente. So we are with the Community Health Department. So we represent the community arm of Kaiser Permanente. Um, so I represent San Bernardino County Service Area, and Cecilia, who is on the phone, she is my colleague. She represents Riverside County Service Area. Many of you may know her. Um, so if you can please, Cecilia, you're welcome to share anything else. This is just the first
Oh no.
intro slide. Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's good. Thank you, Martha. And for those that I haven't seen in a while and probably I won't see right now because I'm not using the screen of the Zoom call. Sorry that I'm missing your faces, but thank you for giving us a few minutes to go over what we now have as some refreshed strategies and ideas of how we can interplay with our community partners that do work in housing and other areas that might be of interest to you.
So next slide, Melanie, please.
Yeah, I'm just sorry. One sec. There we go. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
All righty. Sorry, it wasn't letting me do it from the online version and so I had to quickly download a desktop. So can you guys all see it now?
Mm.
Awesome. Thank you guys for that. I was quickly navigating that, but you should be good to go. Next slide.
Okay. Um, so we've worked in the homeless response ecosystem for many, many years. We would like to share our mission because not while we've partnered with many, we would just like to just reinforce that Kaiser Permanente is a mission-driven organization, and the focus is on improving the health of our members. However, We are also seeking to improve the health of the broader community. So that means vulnerable populations, including homeless individuals across the spectrum, whether chronically homeless, whether those, children, youth, families, single moms, seniors. So really across the spectrum, our goal is to just improve the health of the broader external community. So next slide, please.
Martha, I can talk about this one.
Okay.
So what we do part of our hospital nonprofit, hospital nonprofit side of the house is we really do an intentional effort every 3 years to do a community health needs assessment and really find out where the pressing needs are, where the gaps are, what we really can do to respond in the best way strategically. So our partners really help tell the story for us, and we appreciate everything and the voice you guys bring to the subject matters that are important. But what we want to do in this slide is just share with you 2 links that are for you to go to and visit and use in whatever way it's going to help you write future grants, understand the need better in a geography. But the first one is our overarching website that has every community health needs assessment and implementation strategy report that is done for each hospital, actually in California. But that link will give you the Southern California hospitals, and you could look at any geography you would like and read our reports, as well as read the implementation strategy, which is a separate report from the CHNA, but it's all in that first link. The second link is something you can use any day of the week. It's a platform with data, and it's refreshed much more frequently in terms of where the data source comes from. If that's refreshed, this particular database is refreshed. And you can get as much recent data as you can get, and almost to the zip code level in some cases, if it's reportable at the zip code level. But that's open to everybody in the community to use. It's something that we've set up, and you just don't need a special password. You just set up your own account or your own login, and you can interact with it. It's pretty neat. And again, if you're looking for, good data that's recent for a report or a grant proposal, we welcome you to use that link as well. So Martha and I do take, our community's voice and help bring it together in a report. So the next slide, if you don't mind, Melanie, going to the next slide. We go through a process to identify what all the needs are, but then we have to prioritize our needs. And of course, housing came up pretty high for both of us. So what I'm just showing you on this page, and Martha will talk about, and the next slide on her, is a page from our report, where it just kind of gives what we call a health need profile, summarizes what the community was saying about housing in our area, kind of gleaning from what they said, what really are the pressing needs, and maybe where in the location is the need happening. So this slide isn't meant for you to read and understand, but just to give you a quick glimpse of what our CHNA report looks like once you go inside it. So if you want to go to the next slide, I'm going to have Martha go over what's on her slide. If you want to go more in depth, Martha, go ahead.
Okay. So across San Bernardino County, Kaiser Permanente has 2 hospitals. So one is the Fontana Medical Center, and the second is the Ontario Medical Center. Let me mute. I was hearing the speaker. I hear announcements from the hospital, so my apologies. So same as Cecilia, we have a health need profile. Just looks at different indicators specifically to San Bernardino County service area. So in my service area, indicators that were high. Of course, we know high cost of housing, the number of homeless individuals, overcrowdedness, housing. So these are the indicators that collectively, over 3 years, we are looking to influence, whether through intervention, reduction, prevention strategies, and that can mean many things. But we understand, and in this health need profile, we also compared the different subregions, like in the high desert, the central, the east, and the western, to find out what are those hot spots where we, um, you know, would like to target and support organizations with different interventions, whether it's for, street medicine, emergency shelters, transitional housing, what have you. So, next slide, please.
Mhm. I could talk about this one, Martha. So for our implementation strategy, I just want you to know that, there's so many needs that we have in the community, and we really do feel like, where can we make the biggest impact, and how can we kind of stay true to, making the improvement have meaningful, transformative capacity or ability. And so when we look at that, Martha and I really sit down and look and see what's internal to our, our ability to leverage some assets within our organization. So we want to make sure that we're, like putting Kaiser resources at the table when we're thinking about how to address a need. And as well as look at what you guys are doing, each individual organization collectively, how can we leverage what you guys are doing and help you get further along or expand more. So that's really kind of the formula or the thinking that goes behind how do we identify the top 4 or 5 needs that we end up sharing, which will come next. And so that's our commitment for the next 3 years, to really kind of dig deep in our priorities. But I just wanted this slide to kind of describe or explain, what the thinking was behind how we get to the high priorities, the highest, because there's way more than what we're going to be able to address. So if you can go to the next slide, Melanie. And so this slide will share with you for my hospitals, which we have 2 as well, Riverside and Moreno Valley hospitals. And geographically, I pretty much cover the entire Riverside County. There's some exceptions, but this is the order in which the priorities came out to be. So you can see for us, housing came out to be number 1. We have income and employment, which for that area, we're really looking at, where can we make an impact too on people. For stable housing, they need to have somewhat of an income too. So we want to make sure we're addressing that. We're also going to look at healthcare career pathways in that area. Access to care is, obviously anything to do with obtaining medical care, and then mental and behavioral health. So those are my 4 priorities, starting in 2026, which we are in, all the way through calendar year 2028. That'll be our commitment. So you guys, we're in the right space together with you guys. You can go to the next slide, Melanie, and this will be Martha's.
Okay. So for the Fontana and Ontario hospitals, again, representing San Bernardino County, we have 5 priority areas. The first one is access to care, which also includes child and maternal health. So we're really looking to partner with FQHCs to expand primary care, mental, dental, social health, and also address the healthcare workforce shortages. Under mental and behavioral health, we're looking at addressing, service needs related to whether it's counseling for anxiety, depression. Also, something that was high is the substance use and opioid overdose. So for this need, we're looking to support and or expand services, as well as address the mental health workforce shortage. Our third priority need is chronic disease and disability. So we'll be looking to address healthy eating, active living, connecting the dots to overweight, obesity, diabetes, and other chronic conditions. Our fourth is food and nutrition security. So we know that it's food is costly, and families, oftentimes it's hard to stretch your dollars. So we will continue to work with different feeding agencies, food pantries, and programs, distribution programs. Our fifth priority need is housing. We call it Housing for Health, which includes all of our homeless work. So next slide, please.
Mhm. Thanks, Melanie. I will take the next two slides, and then Martha, you can wrap it up on the last one. So I know we're going a little fast, but I know, Melanie, you're going to share these, or if you haven't already, you'll share them with the group. This is a snapshot of the area where we kind of go deeper in what kind of support will we be working with and collaborating with to help our housing partners. So the overall arching is that we want to improve the systems and the solutions to really reduce at a population level, really the housing and unstable resident population. So really try to help bring them up as much as we can. So there's, of course, places where we want to, support areas that are providing stabilization assistance. We also still want to be a part of making the supply of affordable housing still realistic to, move forward on that. We're also wanting to make sure that, agencies that serve the unhoused population, they have capacity, or they can address, the wraparound care, the whole person care, and the delivery of that to the unhoused. We also have a big push to help the legal aid, the legal side of this work, to prevent evictions and wrongful evictions. So we want to, support that arena as well. In kind of another space, and just in terms of increasing the housing market, or not the market, the housing conditions, the housing offerings, and those helping unhoused, really try to make it so that the population, is served by staffing that, builds their own capacity for themselves to, implement the innovative projects, or, improve policies that will help them care deliver a little more sensitive to the population of being unhoused. So those are areas that we would like to support here in Riverside County. The next document is, again, it's actually a summary for me. What I try to do every calendar year is look at all the agencies that got funded by Kaiser Permanente, which is including our local grant. We have some regional grants, and in some cases, grants come from our national office. But by category, I just kind of summarize our investment, not dollars, as well as which agencies receive dollars in those categories. And so next year, we'll have that summary again. But I can send this document, Melanie, if I did it to you, so you could share it with the team. But that's just, looking back. It's not looking forward, it's looking back. So that's it for me, and I'll have you go to the next slide, and that will be Martha.
Before I continue, I see someone has a question. Dan, we can take that question, Melanie, unless you prefer that we hold.
Yeah, let's go ahead. Dan, go ahead and jump in.
Sure. I'm just wondering what kind of, so do you have a grant round every year? And I also wonder, what is the role that Kaiser and you guys are able to play in advocacy involved in trying to resurrect a 114 unit permanent supportive housing project in Riverside that the city council voted down a $20 million state grant on, called University Terrace. And we haven't seen the health Kaiser or anybody involved in that discussion at the city. And I think your expertise would make a difference if the council heard from you.
That's really good. Thank you for bringing those two questions up. So the first one about our grant program, it's by invitation only. So Martha and I describe myself this way, but Martha, you can use a different analogy. But I look at how to get invited for a grant is that Martha and I are constantly looking at what agencies are doing and where their emphasis is taking place. What we normally do is have to make alignment to some strategies that are maybe even coming from our national office or regional office, and usually grants grants coming from our local department are usually smaller. We open them up once a year. So Martha and I, have to, year round, we're constantly looking to see who we would want to invite throughout the process. For a local grant, my local grants range from, as small as 25,000 to maybe 30 or 40,000, and they're 1-year grants. But when Martha and I are looking at, where can your organization fit in some other strategies that our regional office might introduce to us, we have RFPs that will then, kind of create those opportunities for larger grants. Maybe they're 2-year grants, or they're larger for 1-year grants. And when I say larger, maybe 100,000, maybe 150 or 200, and it could be a little more as well. But what we knew is we have to really make the match happen with what the region and the national office alignment looks like. And those alignments are pretty strict and rigid, and they also come with a little more requirements, maybe reporting and evaluation, data collecting throughout the grant term, as opposed to our local grants being once a year, a final report at the end. So we do, the part that really makes this work the best is the relationships that we have between our partners and knowing what's going on. So that was question number 1. Question number 2 is about, our advocacy and our voice at arenas like City Council. Sometimes we do get involved, and sometimes we don't. We have we take our work in a humble way. We want to make sure that we help raise the right at the right time. So we have a community and government relations person that does some work in that arena. So maybe we just need to create better awareness between us and our GCR. We call them GCR folks. But we are somewhat selective, not selective, but we can usually take a pretty sometimes conservative approach to some politic stuff. But I know what you're saying. What we like to see is the resident voice be lifted as opposed to maybe our organization. But I do get what you're saying, and we've done that before. So it's not like we don't do it or we never will. But sometimes if things are, not within a comfort zone that we have, then we may not have that ability to just step in. But I'm glad you raised it, because it's something that we want to be more aware of.
Yeah. And Cecilia, let me
Martha.
add to that. Yes, let me add
please.
to that. So in terms of policy, the way that Kaiser has been engaged is really at the national level. So if you think about the Kaiser Permanente structure and footprint, so Kaiser operates across 8, almost 9 states. So at the national level, our leaders have engaged in policy conversations or support, and I can share some of that. But because in California, we have Northern Cal, Southern Cal, across California, Kaiser has a footprint in 32 counties. It's difficult and probably not feasible for us to engage at the very local level, geography per county. But I'd like to share, but it's something that we can bring back to our local government and community relations. So that's one part. And then specifically regarding policy shift, Kaiser Permanente is part of the healthcare anchored network, Leaders Voice. So at the national level, Kaiser is at the table to expand and really express the need for federal support, greater support for affordable housing. Second, Kaiser is a member of the mayors and CEOs for U.S. Housing Investment. So this is a project of the National League of Cities where Kaiser Permanente promotes federal affordable housing reforms and opposing cuts to affordable housing. Again, this is at the national level. And then through CityLink, this is an initiative of the De Beaumont Foundation and Kaiser Permanente. This includes evidence-based information policies that large cities have implemented to address housing challenges, such as affordable housing trust. So at the national level, Kaiser has lent its voice. But this is your inquiry is very local, specific. This is something we that we can take back to our colleagues and get an answer for you. Okay, that's what we can do.
That's
So,
great. And so I'm just looking at time and just want to be cognizant of the two presentations. And so we have literally 2 minutes. And so I was wondering if, Martha and Cecilia, if you want, I know that Wendell and I saw Tanya had her hand up too at one point. I don't see it still up. But if this is something, if you guys want to put that in chat and they could try and answer the questions within the chat. And then I could jump to your last slide, Martha, if you want to kind of wrap things up and give any
yeah.
next steps,
Mhm.
if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead and do that and we'll respond in the chat. Okay. So same as with Cecilia. So for 2025, 2026, Kaiser Permanente San Bernardino County Community Health provided a total of 59 grants to 59 organizations at a little bit over, over 3 million in the different areas that I talked about. Our process is the same by invitation only. We do, if someone is interested in being considered, we are open to accepting a letter of interest. We will provide our contact. So you're welcome to reach out to us, and I will look at the questions and address them in the chat. Anything else, Cecilia?
No, I think that's good, except I do have to make a quick announcement. Sorry, Melanie, but I don't know if you guys have heard, but I'm retiring next week. Wednesday is my last day. I feel excited about my future, but I also sometimes feel like, oh, I'm leaving such a great job. But you'll be in good hands. I'm so fortunate to have worked with a lot of you and made an impact. And for those who don't know me or need to get to know the Riverside Community Health Manager, we don't have anybody yet selected, and the posting still needs to get officially out, but it'll be replaced or it'll be filled by somebody who I'm sure is just as dynamic, because this job is pretty amazing. And I think that you guys are going to be in good hands. So I'm going to leave it like that. Take
Yes,
care, everybody. I love it.
the ultimate mic drop by Cecilia. Cecilia, we're so
Yeah.
appreciative of you being here. And I knew it was, and I was trying to crunch, I was working hard to try and get her in to present with Martha and share
Mhm.
out. So I appreciate you being here in your last week, and I'm sure of many handoffs and transitions. So we appreciate it.
Yeah.
And
Thank you for
Martha,
all
we're
the
happy
efforts
that you're
you guys
still
do.
here and that you are definitely our connector to Kaiser. And we look forward to, partnering with you. And I know there's many in this space that partner with you already. So
Wonderful. Thank you for inviting us. I will stay on and I will go through the questions, okay?
awesome. Sounds good. Thank you, Martha. I appreciate it. And so we're going to transition to our second presentation in our meeting today. So I saw the speakers jump on, and I appreciate. So we have today we have Christina, Tia, and Marc Tousignant. Did I say it correctly? Tousignant?
Not bad, Melanie, not
Okay.
bad.
And I am here to share a little bit. They're both from Enterprise Community Partners and I've been told that they are the experts in PSH and first and housing first and just have a depth of knowledge. And so we're super excited for you all to be here as we are really as a region and as a collective of housing learners in this space are really trying to dive in to see what is that research as this conversation is built out in our region. We're trying to educate and work with partners. We're really excited to see what you have to say and to share with us. So I could give you Marc or Christina presenting rights if you intend to share a presentation.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think Christina is actually the one that's got the slides that she wants to share.
Perfect.
If you could help her out with that, that's great. It's great to be with you guys. It seems like a great group. Kind of wish I jumped on a little bit earlier, but I'm Marc Tousignant, and I direct the supportive housing program for the Enterprise's Southern California office. I see Ayako on here. Nice to see you, familiar face. At least there's one here. Um, But, we're very focused on really two things within the supportive housing space. And so we'll talk a little bit about just how the model works and some basics. And sorry if this is redundant a little bit, but we did want to talk a little about the work we're doing specifically. And very gracious, Melanie, to say, we're the experts. Obviously, there's a lot of experts out there. There's a lot of folks working on homelessness and supportive housing across Southern California, certainly in LA where we're based. And we really just value the work that our partners are doing on the ground, obviously every day, just trying to end homelessness for folks that need it, need that housing support. So, we just thought it was prudent as our program has evolved over the years to try to figure out where we could best apply ourselves. A lot of what we're known for, we're a national nonprofit and we're an intermediary. We do a lot of like financing of supportive housing and affordable housing in general. But Christina and I are on the programmatic side. So we're not so much the folks doing the financial support to get projects built, but really kind of helping with like capacity building and technical support and policy work and research and convening and things like that. So that's kind of where we fit in. So just thanks for reaching out, Melanie. I don't know if Araceli's on, but I know she made the connection. She's our policy director, and hopefully this is helpful. We don't want to talk too much. We just want to have a conversation. So, we're going to try to jump at 2:00 if we can. We'll see if that works. But yeah, we'll just jump in. So supportive housing, I mean, this is a model that's been around. It really started, I think, in the 80s and the 90s with really at the incentive of some of the, you can go to the next slide, the sort of the direction of some federal assistance that was coming down from the federal government through HUD. I think communities were really trying to respond to how they could provide housing solutions for those that are exiting homelessness. There was a large sort of infrastructure around supportive services and just outreach and sort of short-term housing, shelter sort of engagement. But, the supportive housing field really kind of grew, also along with the broader affordable housing field. And it really became kind of dominated by a lot of these mission-driven nonprofits that are really, oriented specifically towards creating, and sustaining affordable housing for those that are exiting homelessness, often have disabilities, long histories of homelessness, or sort of repeated patterns of that, and just really need not just the affordability in what is affordable housing. This is kind of where it differs, right? It's also that sort of like supportive services component. So that's really what makes it unique. They're not sort of an afterthought. They're very central, the supportive services, to the whole design. Ideally, they're brought on site as much as they can, whether that's directly through the housing provider or through some partnerships in the community. It's really critical that I think you think about it sort of in that way. It's obviously different than affordable housing and the population it's serving. The financing that comes with it is usually pretty specific. And that can kind of create, obviously challenges as well, because there's a lot of layered eligibility that comes with different financing. And it could be sort of a site-based model where it's like an individual kind of apartment sort of complex, or it could be just scattered site or like a tenant-based approach where folks are given, support obviously out in private market kind of, units out there in the market. Those models are different. We tend to work more with owners that kind of have like site-based housing commitments, but it's really kind of looking at, extremely low rents, the deep affordability, plus the supportive services. And, that's really what I think what makes it unique over time. The goal is really to make sure that folks can stabilize, try to be on their own as much as they can. Obviously, the support's there to help them recover, and just deal with a lot of sort of like housing stability challenges that come from like, being on the streets or in a shelter or just not having stable housing. So it's really about trying to promote that recovery and stability. And that's really where a lot of the services are focused. They're really trying to keep folks housed, keep them thriving, keep them stable. And ideally, folks can stabilize to the point where maybe they can move on to just a regular affordable unit. Some cases that's not possible, but that's really the goal, to try to help stabilize folks. And this is where the evidence has really built up over the last couple decades. And we didn't have enough time, Melanie, to really bring in a lot of citations, but we can certainly send that out as a follow-up. There's been a lot of research on this model over the years at the academic level, certainly at the practitioner level, really looking at why it's important to have a supportive housing intervention in your communities, because there's going to be certain folks that are experiencing homelessness that really do need more than just affordability. And that's really what it's geared for. And that's really why it's sort of solving both a sort of a individual or household level outcome, but also sort of a systems level outcome, because what you're trying to do is reduce, those more costly interventions that happen when folks have to cycle in and out of, institutionalization, whether that's psychiatric care, whether that's jails, hospitals, whatever that may be, emergency room visits, all those things that we know over time are really expensive. The evidence has proved that if you can get folks into housing and provide the wraparound services, it actually is a really effective tool at keeping people stably housed. Now, it only works if it's resourced, right, and it's sort of done in a quality level, but that's really why the model's there. So next slide. And it's important because we think about a three-legged stool and we think about how this housing kind of comes to be. And it's really the capital resources that help obviously build the housing. It's the operating support, which is really the understanding that, look, we've got folks on very low incomes. We're going to need to provide some gap in subsidy around what the rents are relative to what folks can pay. And so we do need some sort of rent subsidy connected to the program. So that's that operating support. And then the services are key. All three of these legs are critical to kind of keep the model successful and sort of, that's how it works. Next slide. Oftentimes we kind of get this equated with housing first, which is more of a philosophy and a practice. Now, the state over time has essentially baked in housing first as a sort of requirement, I think, for any organizations or recipients of sort of state assistance for supportive housing. And the old way, why it's different, and kind of the old way, the understanding was that folks kind of needed to transition before they got to sort of an independent sort of living arrangement that was considered permanent housing. So we expected you to kind of go into shelter or some sort of short-term program, then graduate to a transitional housing program, and then you would be ready to sort of qualify, to kind of be suitable for permanent housing placement. And I think what that housing first model has proved over time, and this is also evidence-based, is that getting folks into housing right away is actually the best way with the wraparound services. It's not sort of just housing alone. And it's not just housing first, it's housing always is sort of our belief, but providing that support that's sort of ongoing and flexible based on the needs of folks, that's really the key to be able to sort of resolve homelessness and really set up folks. Because obviously, if you're in a permanent housing environment, you're more likely and far more successful to be able to pursue other goals related to health or educational needs, job, vocational needs, anything like that, reunification of families. So the key is to really try to look at this differently than the old way. And if you go to the next slide, it's really saying you don't have to go through all of this sort of like treatment or compliance or all of these hurdles that we put up to get folks into housing. We're trying to get them immediate access to housing, and it's very focused on sort of recovery and being sort of individually driven around what supports are needed given what that particular household needs. And there's choice within that, right? This is not something where folks are required to necessarily have to sort of participate in any sort of treatment program or sobriety programs, right? There's a lot of self-determination. It can make it challenging for owners to be able to manage that, but that is the model. And this is where it's really shown kind of effective success at keeping folks housed. So those retention rates are often well above 80. I would say even in the 90% range we see after a year or two. It's been a potent sort of intervention for chronic homelessness. And certainly from a public system standpoint, it's shown pretty significant savings to communities around emergency services and incarceration and all that. And obviously the goal is to really have promote a good quality of life for everybody so that they can thrive in their community. So next slide. So there is a strong emphasis on services, as much on site as possible. Sometimes that's not always possible with the layout of the buildings. We see that in some of the older buildings that maybe don't have all the amenities. But over time, we've learned that the case management ratio, the ratio of basically, service personnel that are connected to a particular household, you really want to keep it close to 1 to 20, if not 1 to 15, because there is a really need for more intensive services, often for folks exiting homelessness. So that means creating space on site for services and office space, for folks to be able to meet with their caseworkers and so on and so forth. The relationship between property management is also really key here, because this is not just typical affordable housing. This is really, where we need to sort of think differently about the approach on property management. The relationship between resident services and property management is really key. There are distinctions, but the goal is to really keep people housed, right? We will obviously need to be compliant with all of our financing and regulations, but it really requires some flexibility and coordination between services and management to really strike that balance around what's best for the household, what's best obviously for the community. And that's delicate because sometimes property managers are not expected to necessarily be trained in, mental health care or case management and all that. And I think one of the things we're seeing over time is the need to train property management so we can be a little bit more nuanced and distinct around how we serve supportive housing populations because the traditional property management model is very just driven on collecting rent, dealing with repairs, and they're not really there for crisis management, right? So, and then we're really there to kind of promote long-term success, whether that's at the building level, the household level. Over time, right, a lot of the communities have begun to just serve older populations because folks are aging over time, or the average age at sort of the initial tenancy is kind of older. So it's important to kind of build in mechanisms, whether that's physical design or through supportive services, to make sure that you're able to accommodate folks to be able to age over time in their community if that's what they need to do, and to be able to make sure that you can meet those needs over time. I'll pause we'll go for one more slide and then I'll pause just for any questions or reactions. So let's go to the next slide. Just key lessons that we've learned. When you think about creating supportive housing, it's really important that the capital funding that helps kind of build the housing is ideally paired with some sort of long-term rent subsidy. We've learned that these properties will not really make it as long as we want them if they don't have some sort of ongoing rent support, just because of the deep affordability and the limited rental income you're going to get from tenant rents, right? We really do need those subsidies there, and developers that are looking to create this housing really need to see those subsidies paired with the capital funding. And I think investors and lenders are looking for that as well. So that's may seem like an obvious thing. I know that we've taken that for granted, but not every community has done that. Secondly, housing navigation is really important. This is the understanding that for our ability to get folks out of homelessness and into permanent housing, they really do need some support to navigate what is a very complex process to sort of apply for housing and make all the different appointments and get the documentation that's needed, and stuff like that. So dedicating resources for housing navigation is really important. It is its own little discipline, and it's still evolving within the field. And then case management is really critical. This is integrated case management, though. So this is looking at behavioral health, mental health, substance use services, and physical health services, and looking at that together as sort of an integrative approach to serving households. It's not just service coordination, which is sort of the typical affordable housing sort of approach, which is, we're going to refer you to the community. We've got some linkages for you. It's really light touch. This is a little bit more hands-on, and that's why that 1-to-20 ratio is really important. We talked a little bit about property management. You cannot undervalue the importance of a well-trained, kind of property management firm. We're seeing a lot of owners try to bring that in-house now because they want to better control that function in terms of the philosophy that they're trying to promote. But again, it does require good coordination with services to be successful. You've probably seen this in your communities, but we've certainly seen it in LA. There have been some lease up and utilization challenges in supportive housing because of the referral process. We didn't really get into this much, but we could have a whole separate presentation on that. But there are issues in terms of being able to really identify folks quickly, get them through the lease up process, and make sure that they've got the support documentation needed. So it's important to be nimble around that, so that if we do see particular communities where we're seeing underutilization, right, and nobody wants to see any housing resource in our system go underutilized. But if that is the case, it's important to be nimble around trying to be on top of that and help troubleshoot and problem solve for that. We're very focused on that in LA because there's been a lot of just layers to the process that we're trying to streamline. And so I'm sure that that's somewhat present no matter where you are. And then creating loops with the development community and the housing provider community to make sure that they can provide opportunities to kind of share lessons learned around what it takes as a practitioner. And as different homelessness systems are trying to redesign or adapt to sort of a shifting landscape, it's important to have a space that you can tap in to learn with them and problem solve together, because we really see them as a really key partner in this ecosystem. And then finally, just it's certainly related to our work, but what we've seen as a lesson learned is we can't just build new housing or try to go out and acquire housing. We got to make sure we also protect and invest in what we've already built. These are really important public investments in our communities. which is why we've dedicated a lot of resources towards preservation, is because we were seeing so much attention on new stock that a lot of our providers were carrying older properties that really did need some reinvestment. And it's important because we want to keep those properties going for the long term as well. So those are things that, I mean, there's a lot we could put on here in terms of lessons learned, but just wanted to share a few of those. So I'll pause there, Melanie, and to the group. I mean, we've got some information about our work that we could present real briefly if you want, but I just didn't want to lose sight of like, a bigger conversation that we could probably have before we dive into that, if at all.
Yeah, we could pause for a second. I see Don raise his hand. Don, you want to come
Yeah.
off mute, and Ayako and Tanya. So they're coming in. So we'll pause for some questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Marc, for the PSH 101.
Sure.
The reality is, all of those lessons learned are definitely things we've learned over the last couple of decades in relation to this. The reality is that long-term rent subsidies are a thing of the past. Those aren't coming. And nobody's putting more funding into long-term subsidies anytime in the future. And Enterprise has always been at the forefront of new approaches, new ideas, putting new things on the table. Are you guys getting involved in any efforts to try to figure out how we can create naturally occurring affordable housing that doesn't rely on billions of dollars in federal subsidies that aren't coming?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point, Don. I mean, I think a lot of that is around rethinking the model in terms of the density of PSH within a particular building, looking at different income levels that could sort of support operations to sort of offset. Obviously, like when you're creating PSH, the expectation is you are going to be serving a pretty low AMI and income range, right? So where's that gap going to come from in terms of like, revenue for the property? So you could look at that. And I think, moving away from maybe 100% PSH models to that, we're certainly advocating to the state to be more active in terms of subsidy support as well, because we know the voucher environment is very constrained, obviously, like from the top down at the federal government. So there's no easy answers to that. Anything we can do to reduce costs obviously is important. That is easier said than done because operating costs have really spiraled recently. So there's nothing, I mean, what you're touching on, there's nothing more important in the field right now than getting this straight. And I wish there was an easy answer, but it's definitely on top of everybody's mind because Don, what's going to happen if we don't figure this out is we're going to lose communities, which is really sad because these are obviously a lot of our bedrocks of our system right now. And unfortunately, owners, it's like any real estate, right? They cannot continue to keep this going if we can't, generate enough revenue. I mean, these nonprofits don't have enough resources to keep pumping their own, reserves into the property, right? So this is where public lenders like the city, county, state housing departments are starting to change their attitude a little bit because they realize they got to help figure this out together. But you're right. If you think about where the subsidies are right now, it's not even good for new production, not to mention existing stock. Yeah. Ayaka, go ahead.
Great. Hello, Marc. Thank you for being on today. And thanks to Enterprise Community Partners for your many decades of amazing work. So Ayako Tsumi here with Mary Erickson Community Housing. I also head up the expansion of housing solutions pillar for Inland SoCal Housing Collective. And Marc, I'd like to ask you about what kind of movement are you seeing around offering sober living options on a voluntary basis? Meaning there are more people who desire to live in sober living in order, to get their lives back on track, but they aren't offered any options. So where do you see the industry going on offering sober living options on a voluntary basis?
I mean, generally, I think like we need to just have as many diverse options as we can, right, that meet the need. And so I don't think you could sit here and try to be overly defensive that isn't sort of a viable pathway for a certain percent of the population that wants that and would sort of engage in that kind of programming, right? It's not what the current model really suggests, right? It's very much like harm reduction. No, we're not going to sort of require anything. You see, obviously, where the federal policy is moving. I think we're going to require the systems to be more adaptive to create pathways for that. It's just not really something that's in vogue or the funding is being directed to now. We keep hearing about it more and more, just from folks on the ground or providers or whatever, just folks obviously in the community saying, look, we want to have this option. We know there's a demand for this option. We know there's a coalition behind that movement too. So it's not insignificant. So I don't see any other way forward other than that being a pathway forward. And it's just it's going to require shifting the status quo, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. I just bring it
Yeah.
up one more time, like you just said.
Yeah.
The more we bring it up, the
Yeah.
more over time there will be more support. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. You may be on mute. Yep.
I apologize about that. Tanya Torno, I oversee the Office of Homeless Services in Riverside. You talked about housing first, and I think one of the things that we've seen sort of nationally, and even here locally, to Dan's point about a project that was recently denied, is that this misperception of like what housing first is, and really as an anything goes sort of housing model, which is truly not the case. I think you spoke to it very clearly from my perspective in that, right? The reality is like no preconditions to access housing, but the reality is, especially for permanent supportive housing projects, rapid rehousing projects, right, our participants are signing lease agreements and subject to, right, following through on those requirements. So one thing that our board, our continuum of care board has asked is that we reconsider, like we give some consideration to renaming the model and rebranding it, because housing first just has a negative connotation and it means what
it does.
what
No,
people
it's got
want it to mean.
stigmatized. Yeah.
So we're looking at, right, is it low barrier housing, and really quickly leading to no preconditions, but tenants are subject, and explaining vividly what it is. I think with the training component to property managers, and if we can do that well, then it provides a space where right, they're not just automatically going to the notice to vacate, but they're working with the service provider to provide support. But ultimately, like, we need to promote a good neighbor policy to ensure that we're not leaving our communities or any of our residents, feeling unsafe than they were before the project started. I think we owe that to our larger region. So I just want to see if there's been any conversations you've been a part of, and if you have any suggestions on, should I call it low barrier housing? I'm trying to think of something cool, to bring.
I mean, I think you are taking a very responsible approach to it. So that is heartening to hear, just the sort of the balanced approach to it and being thoughtful about it. I haven't heard like particular terminology that's like becoming sort of dominant in the narrative, but I think that makes sense. I mean, that's essentially what it is. The reality is that we're trying to reach the folks that really need the housing the most, right? The less barriers we create, the more we can streamline that sort of those hurdles, the reduction of those hurdles, the better. But it doesn't mean that we just give folks housing, we forget about it, we don't provide the services that they need. And we also got to be admitting that like there is a certain percent, right, of folks that we're probably trying to give PSH interventions to that really do need more support than that. And that is really a trend we're seeing. It's almost like this, calling it like PSH plus or something else, where it's like no matter what we do with our PSH model, that's not going to be enough, because we can't ask PSH to be everything to everybody, right? And I'm sure you see that too, right? Not all PSH is homogenous. So that's important. And that could happen at the front end around case conferencing and really being more judicious around the placements. But it's also having more diversity in what you can offer folks too. Because we know it's not meant to be folks that like need like ADL assistance and all that. I mean, that's not really what it was intended for. So I think you're right. I think rebranding it, rephrasing it, but still trying to reach the populations you need to is a smart way to go about it. And there's probably some other folks that we could probably connect to that are in those conversations around how this is being recast because of the interest in wanting to keep the philosophy and the commitment to serving those that really need the housing the most, but not getting caught up in all of the branding and the stigmatization of it, and that may help with like at the community level, right, with what you're trying to do. Because obviously we still need to reach the people. Yep, go ahead. Let's go Wendell and then Dan. Well, Dan,
Dan,
you're
you're
on mute.
muted.
Yeah, you're muted. So was Wendell.
Okay, sorry about that.
Really
Um,
good.
uh, part of mine is along the same lines as how do we really strategize and address the fact that there are requirements around our housing first properties. We've run into that in Riverside, and definitely a lot of concern about needing, people wanting to have everyone either sober living or committed to sober living going into it, which of course, is not a part of the housing first philosophy. So, just looking for new ways to position that. I know in at Inland SoCal Housing Collective, we've just completed a pretty thorough research review using some of our fellows, Randall Lewis fellows from UCR, along with Damian O'Farrell, to do that deep dive. And I know that Family Promise, as well as Path of Life, are also very concerned about this issue. So any guidance you have as we sit down to strategize about that would be very helpful.
Happy to, and maybe that's just some follow-up. And I just think it's important to provide options for that kind of a model to exist and for that kind of demand to be met, And I don't think we should have some sort of like overarching defensive philosophy that it's only got to be housing first, and for in every case as we sort of embrace. So it does require a shift in thinking and approach and programming. But I think if you can prove that this occupies a viable space in the ecosystem around providing affordable housing or supportive housing to folks, then that's the end goal, right? And certainly that's where a lot of the policy is beginning to shift, right? I don't know that the state's going to walk away from it. They seem pretty committed, right, to housing first and making sure that that's there. But we certainly know where the federal government's trying to go. So there's no question that this tension is going to keep bubbling up. So happy to keep strategizing offline. I mean, we're not as involved in those conversations as much, but we know people that are and can be helpful, I think, in making those connections and just making sure you're tapped into the current thinking around that and strategic approaches around that.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
of course,
You
yeah.
do hear the state folks using low barrier instead of housing first these days. I mean, it really is like Tanya was talking about, more about a rebranding
Yes,
and a
yes.
reimagining of
That's right.
it, not
That's
trying to
right.
sell it as nothing's happening, but
Right,
we've
right.
got on-site stuff here to build success.
That's true. I mean, you may recall they baked it in. It was like in some states, it's just policy. In California, they baked it in through legislation. So it's there. And all the programs have to align with that. So that's how significant the commitment is. But that doesn't put providers in any easy situations, right? Because they're trying to navigate a shifting federal environment. They got state requirements, right? They're kind of the ones in the middle. So it's going to be very interesting how they're going to be able to be compliant.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
SB 1380 requires housing first, and
Oh
it's
yeah, right.
explicit.
Oh
So,
yeah, right. No, that didn't happen accidentally, right?
yeah.
A lot of advocacy went into that. Yeah.
So Mark,
Yeah.
we can go another 10 minutes if you're cool, if you want to jump,
Yeah.
if you can, if
I'll
you
go
guys
another
are
10
good.
because I would love to talk about our work a little bit. Like, this was
Perfect.
more global.
Yeah.
And we may not even, I mean, I appreciate the gesture because like we're probably not even the best messengers out there to give you the basics on supportive housing, even though we kind of know this stuff. So we're happy to kind of provide some other tutorials and stuff. But let's just talk real quick about sort of our work. And we're really leaning in on two spaces, and we're really going to talk about one of them today, which is the preservation, the sustainability and the preservation of the existing housing that's out there. And Melanie and others, I would love to know where you guys are at with this sort of part of the sort of the ecosystem, if we will, because we kind of came to it a little bit belatedly, thinking that we just wanted to focus on new supply and new supply. But our providers kept coming back to us and saying, "Hey guys, we got a lot of existing stuff that was built or acquired, decades ago, that is just aging, right? And it's really needs some reinvestment." And like those are the same communities that every day, right, are serving folks exiting homelessness. So there's just no reason not to be thinking about how we can sustain that. Plus, you guys know this, we're on the hook for 50 plus years, right, in terms of our affordability commitment. So even though, the tax credit, if it was a tax credit program, that might have, been 10 or 15 years, right? And now it's like we got another 40 years, we got to maintain this. So anyways, some of the barriers we're trying to resolve, they're kind of physical, financial, or policy related. Physically, it really just boils down to the fact that a lot of these buildings are aging. They have deferred maintenance. They have systems that need to be upgraded. that's a major, major imperative for any bigger repositioning or rehab for the property, because they continue to just drain not only the financials on these properties, but just the quality of life too, right, for residents. Financially, it really comes down to just the imbalance in income and sort of expenses, and expenses have really risen far beyond what was projected decades ago when these deals were put in motion. So it's not a surprise. A lot of properties are underwater now. They've limited or have no reserves left because they've tapped into them. And owners have to kind of contribute their own resources to keep the properties going, which is just not sustainable for, thinly margined nonprofits. And then on a policy front, unfortunately, we just haven't really created a lot of options for preservation. If you think about what's out there, look, a lot of folks look at California or LA and they're like, you got all this money. Well, a lot of it's not very compatible for preservation, unfortunately. And at the same time, we haven't really gotten strategic about just the stabilization sort of needs to stabilize portfolios. You might have saw this in LA with Skidder Housing Trust getting, having to dissolve. And a lot of that was just because we weren't really strategic about it. It wasn't just, the organization being kind of a bad actor. So that's a big issue. And then just the adaptation to use coordinated entry, the high acuity population that's sort of endemic to that. It's created just some extra costs, right, that are not foreseen for older deals. And it's just a capacity limit that a lot of these older properties just can't afford. So those are kind of what we're up against. We did a lot of research last year to try to just sort of revisit where we are. So we go to the next slide on the a couple different issues around preservation. One was just the physical needs. We had never really dug in that deeply. So we wound up doing physical needs assessments on a sample of properties that we were studying, and that was really insightful. We also looked at this issue around SROs, which I don't know how much that shows up in your communities, but it's certainly a popular model in LA and even in the Bay Area, because a lot of the early supportive housing were these old hotels that were acquired and rehabbed. And then we kind of do every 2 years, we look at the aging PSH stock in LA and do a risk assessment to sort of, keep up to speed on the profiles of those properties. So that just came out actually, I think it says December, but it really came out in January. So I'll just maybe another minute or two, and then we'll pause. But let's go to the next slide. So these were some of the key takeaways from the research, right? A lot of these are SRO units. Significant amount are facing deficits. Owners are kicking in their own resources. We're seeing higher than average vacancy rates. And again, there's still a bunch of units that don't have subsidy at all, or they're just under subsidized, meaning the subsidy is just not keeping pace with expenses. That said, the state is starting to set aside some money through the PRP program, the Portfolio Reinvestment Program, to preserve properties that are legacy type properties. And that's a step in the right direction. It's not on any big scale, but it's an advocacy opportunity for us to make sure that we're not losing sight of still dedicating resources for these existing housing programs and not just saying it's got to be new stock. So we're starting to move the needle a little bit, but it's very small. And I think maybe let's go to the call to action real quick, Christina, if you can. Yeah. So again, dedicated pathways. Our takeaway is these projects won't get preserved on their own. They really need, funding dedicated for this purpose. There are some immediate needs though that we can invest in, like the physical needs study figured out just roofs, elevators, HVAC systems. There is stuff in the next year or two that would really make a difference to improve these buildings, to kind of buy some time for bigger reinvestment. But unless we really resolve this subsidy issue, and that was Don's point, we're not really gonna preserve these sites long term. They really need a different model. They need a different formula. It's just really difficult to operationalize these sites long term, given the economics. We definitely need more political will. That has been sort of something we've really been lacking. We're starting to see more leadership, but it's very early on that, I would say. And then even just how we underwrite these deals. The whole point is PSH is different than regular affordable housing. We have to treat it differently in how we sort of underwrite and structure the projects up front. And if we don't do that, I think we're going to continue to see some of these outcomes. And then finally, capacity building. It's really important. This is really hard work preserving, existing housing. These nonprofits really need grants. They need technical support. They need to be able to hire consultants in some time. So we really need to make sure we're supporting them to be better equipped, because this is definitely what's in front of them right now. They need to help these existing portfolios. So those are some things that we're working on in the preservation space. And I think there'll be links to this research if you want to look at it separately. Be happy to get it to you. And yeah, we'll just end it there. So back to you, Melanie.
If you have time, I know Wendell was able to jump on, back
Yes.
on. And so I
Yes.
was wondering if we could get, because he jumped off
Yes.
last time.
Yes.
So,
Wendell.
Can you hear me now? I think I
Yeah.
saw
We got
smart.
you.
Yeah,
We got
we
you.
got
We got you.
Okay. I just want to bring up the subject of smaller agencies in rural areas.
Okay.
In their mountains, for example, the good news is we got a small home key grant 5 years ago, and we've got 6 units, good, 2 more being added. But since then, we've hit like the wall, and it's our impression that capital funding, if you're not doing 50 to 100 units, just call me next century. And we do. And the other thing is there hasn't been any development in the mountains, and I think Morongo is kind of with me there. The Housing Authority, bless their hearts, they partnered with us, and they have a 50 unit affordable housing in the mountains, but that's it. And that was 15 years ago. Our little 6 unit was the biggest development in the last 15, 20 years, and that's kind of pathetic. And
Yeah.
so we're struggling. I don't know that there's a real answer. We keep trying. We've reached out to a few bigger developers to come up here. We've kind of solved the services part, but capital is a major problem.
Yeah, I think what you're pointing to, Wendell, is the industry's really dominated towards that kind of a product, right? The
Yeah.
bigger multifamily, the tax credit program, and I mean, we certainly know that being a tax credit syndicator. So, communities are still getting their arms around what it would take to work with these smaller multifamily properties, even these naturally occurring properties, what that model looks like, what types of providers are well positioned, how you vet those deals. I know there's interest. We're seeing that at the city and the county level. I can't say as much about the communities out there, but they're wanting to get their head around that because they realize they can't just focus solely on these bigger tax credit buildings. And a lot of the housing stock, obviously, the majority is smaller stuff anyway. So I was going to say partnership opportunities may be a way to go forward. It sounds like you're already entertaining that. I mean, that is a way to try to both build capacity, get some, experience in there, be able to kind of get your feet wet with some of this stuff. And, maybe there's a way to kind of combine some of those sites together. Happy to talk more offline about it, but you're touching the vein of, I know, what's of interest for a lot of communities, which is they want to diversify their approach because they realize that the resources and the subsidies, like to Don's point earlier, they're just not there for the bigger multifamily approach. But that's kind of how the industry's grown, and it's kind of been dominated by that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One last little question.
Yeah.
In a lot of state and county grants, they're set aside for youth or various things. Do you think there could ever be set aside for small communities?
Why not? Yeah. I mean, we've seen certain programs with like geographic kind of or smaller. I mean, there are some programs that do carve out that, but it's not common. It's not common. You're right, because it's not always aligned and coordinated with the financing that's out there that is going to favor bigger buildings and more kind of cost efficiency with that. So yeah, you're right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Wendell. I see, Dan, you have a question, and I know we've kept Mark over an extra 10 minutes already. And so if Mark, you're able to hang, if not, I'm wondering if we could take it offline or if it's something quick, Dan.
Just my quick question is, given the cuts, I just heard a presentation today on the cuts to Medi-Cal and to also CalFresh and the impact that's going to have on households. I'm really concerned about we're going to hit a tipping point for a lot of households and force them out on the streets.
Yeah.
Are you prepared for that? Is there an organized effort around preventing that?
You're exactly right, Dan. That was always the
On
risk.
Enterprise to solve that?
Yeah, no, I know we're well aware of it, and that was always the risk, right? With a shift like that, whether it was through different capital programs, Medi-Cal funding, Medicaid funding, things like that. That was always going to be the outcome. was going to be more housing instability. It's just because that's the infrastructure we build up over time. We know what works. So when you threaten that, you take away that fabric. There's no doubt that's going to be the impact. So I know communities are looking at how they can move resources around to try to offset that. I haven't seen any easy answers. It just seems like inevitably it's going to lead to some negative outcomes. There's just no way around it. But obviously, communities are really trying to get their head around that. Certainly, I know what's coming down with the federal continuing care program, right, and trying to stabilize and brace ourselves for a reduction in permanent housing investments. And when you think about that together with the sort of the Medicaid cuts, like that's basically what we built our model around. So it's massive. There's no easy answers there, Dan, but it's on everybody's mind. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a perfect storm, and we
Perfect
need to
storm.
get the word out to the public. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
this is coming
Yeah.
down the pike.
Yeah. Yeah.
We may not see it all until, the Medicaid cuts come
That's
in
right. That's
after
right. That's
next
right.
year, but next
That's
year
right.
it's going to start.
Well, it's going to put more
It,
pressure on state and localities to try to figure this out, unfortunately, and because we can't do this without the federal government support, unfortunately. But so I think that's going to put more pressure on their budgets, which are already strained. They're already in deficits, right? So it's really, really forcing us to have some really difficult decisions around what to prioritize. I think in LA they're trying to prioritize permanent housing investments, and they're cutting some of the outreach and services, this shelter, transitional housing stuff, because they realize they want to keep people housed as best they can. But there's some really bad trade-offs. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
is
Thank you.
Enterprise looking in the social housing model space at all?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And if you want some more info on that, we've actually got a lead person that's working on that work down I could connect you with if you want to talk
Okay.
more about that. Yeah, yeah, it's a company-wide conversation. Yep.
Well, Mark, as you can see, we are very excited that you and
Yeah.
Christina showed up and were able to share just a bit of your knowledge and your depth of experience, and even just a better context to the questions at large, and just the moving pieces at large. Araceli, thanks for connecting us. Araceli is our co-chair of our policy pillar, our Educate and Advocate for
Nice.
Public Policy pillar. Um, and so she definitely helped make that connection
Hmm.
for us. So, we do have a group, and we've talked about it in this space, and anyone is welcome to come. There's already a group of folks working on, a housing first kind of narrative education series, but really at large, looking at how do we talk about PSH funds, right? How do our PSH projects really at a bird's eye view, and how do we change that narrative? And so I think that our group will probably be reaching up to you and Christina, Mark,
Please
and a
do.
little bit with some follow-up and maybe a little bit of guidance. But if anyone else is interested in joining that conversation, just shoot me an email or let me know in the chat, and I could add you to that meeting.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, because I mean, we've been so focused. A lot of our funders are driving us to this to focus on sort of LA related work, but our office really serves Southern California,
Yeah.
right? So we want to be more engaged outside of LA, and I think this could be a way to provide some collaboration and support. Obviously, RSL is connected, all the better. So
Yeah, we'd
yeah,
love that.
let us know. We can be resourceful.
We'd love that. So I'll
Yeah.
definitely reach out to you all and
Okay.
see how those connections work, and how we can support each other for sure.
That'd be
So
great. You got a great bunch here.
yeah,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
do. We got a great bunch, and this
Yeah.
is only a quarter of us, I think. So,
Okay.
but we won't sick all of us on you, so don't
Yeah.
worry.
Yeah. No, it was great. I appreciate the time. Thanks for including us. Okay.
Thank you for coming. We
Okay.
appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye. So,
Thank you.
we're going to just use the last 10 minutes of the meeting just to provide some quick pillar updates, and just activities that are happening with the collective. I first want to elevate the strategic planning process. So we kicked that off in December. And you guys, many of you were very gracious with your time and took the survey, which we had estimated and tried out at 30 minutes, but I know many of you spent much more time being very thoughtful in your responses. So I appreciate that, the time you've given to us to provide your feedback. We've been analyzing it and going through, and because of the great results, we needed a little bit more time to analyze it and go through. So we really appreciate your feedback. What's to come is we'll be identifying some focus groups with the support of our consultant and the Inland SoCal Housing Collective Board. Some focus groups that will follow up. So those might be housed within our pillar meetings. Those might be some meetings outside of that. We're going to talk and discuss that, and then send some times out to certain groups of folks to just dive in based off of the results and have a more in-depth conversation around that. And so look forward to that, or look out for my email if if we're holding those, and if you're able to attend, we would appreciate that as we continue in this process and this kind of analyzing time. Um, Next up, we could just do quick updates on the policy pillar. Ayako, you came off mute? Did you have something to add? Oh, okay.
No, go ahead, policy.
Okay, I was going to do a quick policy and then we'll go. So with our policy pillar, again, we meet on the first Tuesday of the month at 9 o'clock on Zoom. This past last week, a group of folks, a handful of folks were able to go up to Housing California Conference and do some advocacy with a team throughout the IE region. It was very great to meet with. We met with two in-district members. And prior to that, we created a loose policy agenda for that visit. In this upcoming meeting, we'll be really digging in and solidifying what are those policies that we have elevated over the past 2 months, what's gone through. We've updated a tracking system with the support of our UCR fellow. And so we'll be talking, reviewing, validating that in our next policy pillar meeting. So please come if you have policy ideas or want to elevate or want to have a voice in that space. Moving forward to our next, Ayako, do you want to talk a little bit about housing expansion of housing solutions? And I could add, I was going to mention the events, but yeah, jump in. You're on mute.
Oh, go ahead with events. That's fine.
Okay, and so with, I'm sure you guys have seen in the newsletter and just some social media pushes we did, we have our 5th annual Affordable Housing Mixer, which will be at the Civil Rights Institute in Riverside on Friday, April 17th. It'll be from 4 to 6, so counter to past years, we're doing it to a Friday, and we're moving it towards the end of the day, so it's a little bit easier to folks. We're moving it to downtown Riverside. Last year it was in San Bernardino. This year we're doing it back at Civil Rights Institute. We have asked and we have a request in to have members from HCD attend and kind of be our guest speakers or guests there to kind of dive in, network with, learn, and talk a little bit more about. And so we're hopeful that someone will be able to come. We asked for the secretary. We went big. We asked for Secretary Moss to come, but while I was at the conference, literally talking to her, they had just sent the decline. So but there's some folks from her staff that might be coming. So we're hopeful that HCD will be there. Some folks from there just to talk a little bit. Sorry, not HCD. The two bureaus now. So we have the business and housing development. HCD, there might be a few HCD folks too, but we're hoping that staff from Secretary Moss's team will be at the mixer. So please come. And once we get more details of those guests who will be there, we'll provide those details. But that will be kind of a wrap of the end of a day tour we'll be doing with them. And all right. And I have the registration link I'll drop in the chat while Ayako is providing further updates.
Great. All right. Thanks, Mel. Ayako Tsumi here, reporting for the expansion of housing solutions pillar. We're focused on different types of housing innovation models. We're focused on everything from homeless to home ownership housing and everything in between. Continuing our work from last year, we wanted to continue that focus on middle housing. So that's basically a duplex that's not quite a multifamily. To look at, what kind, we don't want to forget about ownership, and we don't want to forget about more, it's not the giant multifamily, but it's not a single family detached either. So what kind of options do we have for the in-between? Can we encourage more of this development, hopefully both naturally occurring, almost affordable, and then obviously some will need to be subsidized. We want to look at those options and make them, work for the Inland Empire. In the chat, we've talked a little bit about the Small Lots Big Impact project that's happening in LA. So just a quick review. And a group looked at basically every empty lot in the city of LA, did background checks on it, and see what is what would be viable for development for housing, and then did an architectural a contest. And now they're at the RFQ stage for construction. So there are some delays there, but we want to carefully monitor what is LA doing? How can we learn from it in the Inland Empire? We've got every city owns a lot of very small little lots that might be perfect for low density, gentle density housing. And what could we do with that that's lower cost? So we want to monitor that, make sure that it really fits for Inland Empire, and learn from other jurisdictions. So please keep a note out for that. We meet the second Thursday of every month from 9 to 10 a.m. Second Thursday, 9 to 10. If you'd like to join us for these meetings, please email Melanie Steele and we'll get you on the list. Thank you.
All right. And lastly, we have our wealth building and preservation pillar / bank on coalition um, um, pillar. And so there is Jay. Jay, do you want to provide just a quick update announcement about our forum?
Yeah, thank you, Melanie. And on April 8 in the morning, starting at 9 in downtown San Bernardino, we will be welcoming a number of our partners, including many here, to our annual in-person Bank On Forum. And this year we're focusing on children and youth because the state of California has mandated that high school graduates will need a component, one semester of financial health, financial literacy training in their schooling. And so we're going to be looking at how to work with and partner with many of our school districts and help many of our young people to hopefully never end up in the situation where they are drowning in credit card debt and have to work hard just to get back to zero. We want them to start from zero and not look back and move far ahead quickly in their financial resilience and their capability, which will definitely help our community as we have more and more people who are able to take care of their own needs financially and to lift up the finances of our entire region here. So we'll be working on that. And just a quick mention that Melanie had me attend another event with a legal organization in the Inland Empire and highlight some of the things that we're doing and some of the options. They were mostly focused on people being evicted from rental properties, but we also highlighted the work with preventing foreclosures and other things like that that involve people losing their housing, not just rental housing. So it was great to meet many partners there, and we'll be following up with them and inviting many of them to come as well. So we look forward to seeing you April 8th, and the location will be the ThinkWise Credit Union just north of downtown and starting at right at 9 a.m. and finishing at 11. So thank
you,
you.
Jay. And then I put the link in there. And last, I just wanted to squeeze in just a quick update of another strategy that's happening. We have a partnership with some of our of general faith partners, whether they might be a church or they are a nonprofit service provider that has a faith component to it, but just faith partners in the IE that serve a specific geographic area. Tomorrow we have a breakfast scheduled with them, a group of 10 or so faith partners to look and continue the work of a planning of strategies of how do we bring our wealth building tools such as Bank On and other financial education resources to our communities, leveraging a lot of our anchor partners, right? Our anchor partners are those faith communities, especially in the IE, as we've seen and learned. And So we're going to have a planning breakfast with them, just a small, really intimate group of faith partners. I see one of them here right now, and we'll see you tomorrow, George. But we look forward to bringing some updates on those two to the general collective. So. And with that being said, I thank you guys for your time. And if you have questions, I'll hang out for a little while. But we look forward to seeing you next month or in any of the pillar meetings. Take care.
Thank you.
Great meeting.
Hi, Melanie, are you there?